We are natural story-making machines. We use stories to explain our world around us, our history, our current actions, everything. The problem is that sometimes those stories are accurate and sometimes they're not. And even if they are accurate, sometimes those stories that we tell ourselves can hurt us. So let's talk about how we can use the stories we tell ourselves to actually make our lives better, as opposed to rationalize our behaviors. So we create stories to explain our world. So-and-so was mean to me when I was 13, and so this is just the way I am. To justify our emotions or actions because my father treated me this way. That's the reason why I treat my children this way, to raise our comfort level with where we are. So I can't produce this product that I really, really want to do because I just can't work more than X hours a day because of this story that you're telling yourself, all those kinds of things. So there are many, many examples in our lives. I've just given you a few of them, but just consider this one for just a moment. So let's just imagine that your story is, in my first relationship ever, this is what happened to me. And those things that happened to me affected me deeply. And so therefore, now I act in these different ways. Okay, now that can be totally accurate, or it can have some things that you've shaped over time that may not have actually happened at that time. You just have imagined that. So just think about this for a moment. Stories are actually not reality. How many times have you ever compared your story with like your partner about how you met and realized that you've got two very different stories? And you go, okay, which one of those is accurate? I don't know. Mine's accurate for me. Theirs accurate for them. And it's like, which one's actually accurate? Well, here's the thing. They may neither be accurate. They're stories. And as a result, stories can be totally or partially fiction. That's what happens with stories. And most importantly about stories is that they can be rewritten. So how many times have you seen something, and so you had this story in your mind, and then later on you found out a piece of information that immediately shifted your entire story about that particular person, that particular event, that particular situation. And immediately upon hearing that, it's like, oh, I was judging inappropriately. That's a great example about how a shift in your story changes everything you are, everything, the way you act, and everything you do. That's a story rewrite. Well, what if we were to go back in time and evaluate the stories that we tell ourselves upon which our life is based, and ask ourselves, not is it true or not, because actually that's not the most important thing at this point. It's, is it possible that I could rewrite that story in a slightly different way, and that story could become a positive rather than a negative in my life? So this is especially important for those stories that form our past, that are the things that this is the way I am. This is who I am. So what if, just like the example that I gave you of, you learned something new and all of a sudden your entire attitude about that story changed? What if you did that with some of the stories from your past? Is it possible that that could change your perception or your thoughts about that specific situation, about that specific instances? And is it possible that your changed thoughts about those things could actually change you? Interesting. So this is part of what therapy is all about, is looking at some of those stories and sometimes rewriting those stories in different ways. So I suggest that it's worth considering going back and looking at the stories in your life and look at yourself and others in those stories with kindness and grace, recognizing that both yourself and others had reasons why you acted the way you did in those particular situations. And those reasons, if looked at with kindness and grace, could actually shift your entire perception about what happened in that story. And that story can now shift the way you act today towards them, towards other people, even about stories about people who have passed on. Rewriting that story can cause you to think differently. And by the way, we don't have to do this just in the past. We have stories right now that we tell about our situation right now that influence our behavior and our productivity and what we do right now. So for example, hey, I didn't keep that commitment, whether it's a commitment to myself or to others because, well, that what comes after the because is a story. And is it possible that by shifting that story, you can shift whether you keep those commitments or not? So here's another story. I felt like not pushing through and finishing that thing that I had decided to myself that I was going to do because, and the words that come after the word because are a story. What if instead of saying that, you didn't say, I didn't finish it because, or I didn't finish it right now because, instead you say, I'm going to push forward and do that because of a positive story, because I've decided I'm going to be a different person, because I've decided I'm going to produce, because I've decided I'm not going to bed until this is done. Even if it's 4 o'clock in the morning, I am going to get this thing done because I've told myself a new story, which is I keep my commitments to myself. I keep my commitments to others. I get it done. So what if you were to start rewriting your stories? That story about the things that are happening currently, as well as the things that happened in the past, from one of a negative result that happened to one of a successful result. Can you see how your life could actually be a better thing if you were to do that? My question for you is this. Could you do this? More importantly, would you do that? Would you go and rewrite some of your core stories? Now, maybe you don't want to go back to the key story that shapes your entire life. Maybe you take some stories around that and look at them in different eyes and say, what if I was to rewrite that? What if I was to consider that perhaps they were struggling with their own issues and that's why they couldn't they couldn't care for me the same way that I wanted to be cared for? Whatever those things are, and I'm not a therapist. I'm just a person trying to deal with these things in my own life, just like you are. What if? What if you could change your world? Your future could literally be radically improved just by looking at some of your stories. So what if you could rewrite some of your stories, both of your past and of your current behaviors? By the way, this one may be more important than going back into the deep morass of your past. But the things that you're telling yourself today about why you're not getting the stuff done that you really want to be doing, what if you just change those stories? I suggest it's well worth thinking about and well worth experimenting and trying. And you know what? You're going to fail a bunch of times. That's my experience. You're going to fail a bunch of times with this. But as you do it over and over again, and maybe as you go get some help to do it, you're going to become better. You're going to become happier. you're going to become more productive and you're going to become a better person than you are right now. What's your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. This is Don Crowther saying, just go do this stuff.